What a mess our world is in today. It seems like every day we grow further and further apart from one another. Today, I'm going to tackle the topic of the relationship between the community and law enforcement. Now, you might be thinking, we don't need to know about this issue. It's obvious that there are so many things wrong within it. Well, today, you might just learn something new and take a deeper dive in through the work that I performed over the past 16 weeks. First, I would like to set a disclaimer. Today, I'm speaking on a very sensitive topic that can make a lot of people feel uneasy. I know that many people feel a lot of different feelings that are connected to this topic today, but my goal is to use a space that we can come together no matter who you are or what you believe in. Everyone has a bias. Our biases could well shape our opinion and perspective on a lot of issues depending on our experiences. But because of the biggest issues that we see in our world today, it is so important to stop, take a step back, slow down, listen, and learn from one another, even those that have a different perspective, because that's how we grow. According to Kassad, people are especially likely to process information to support their own beliefs when the issue is highly important or self-relevant. So it is a part of human nature to have different perspectives, preferences, leanings, and partialities, but sometimes bias can become invisible to us. So today, no matter what stance you have within this issue, it is important to come to conversations like this open-minded and curious, because you might just obtain a different perspective after my speech. So let's jump right into all the stickiness. Last year, George Floyd's life was lost at the hands of a police officer. Our world shook with grief and anger. Protests and riots happened all over our world, and it seemed as if we the people came together to be unified in pursuit for change within our justice system. It was us versus them. Now, during all this, I remember thinking, what is wrong with our world? This is human life. How can I be watching this right now? As an undergrad criminal justice major with aspirations to join law enforcement one day, I truly became so curious about how this issue could be fixed, or at least be better, because I knew that one day, if I followed my dream in joining law enforcement, I would be living right in the thick of this issue every single day. So I'm going to share my journey in approaching this project, what I found through my research and interviews, and the framework that I designed for this issue. So I had a lot of great insights that drove my project. I found that legitimacy was a relevant factor in this disconnect that we see today between the community and law enforcement. According to an article written by Jones in 2020, legitimacy involves officers feeling trusting and supported by their community and their own higher up personnel. Then I looked on the LAPD website through their community relations unit to see if maybe they had any programs that address issues like this. And I came across a couple, but one in particular caught my attention, which was the Days of Dialogue program. Now, when I clicked on it, it stated that its mission was to be a catalyst in the community problem-solving process by creating a dialogue on sensitive social issues, just as these, among diverse community groups. And the results have shown that 97% indicated that they felt free to express their views on all issues and that their views were heard. Over 90% felt that dialogue would improve their intergroup relations and or result in a positive impact on their community. But there has not been an event since April 2020 because of COVID. The third thing that was really important in my research that also plays a role into this issue is transparency and accountability. Both are needed and wanted by the community. According to the President's Task Force, in order to embrace a culture of transparency, law enforcement agencies should make all department policies available for public review and regularly post on the department's website information about stops, summons, arrests, reported crime, and other law enforcement data aggregated by demographics. So through these findings, my design team and I came up with a focus for this project by creating an opportunity statement, which is, we would like to explore ways to help law enforcement and the community to rebuild a better relationship so that they can achieve better interactions, trust, and engagement. So, from this opportunity statement and moving forward, I really wanted to get quality information by simply just having conversations. I performed interviews with both law enforcement and community members, and these interviews varied diversely by speaking to law enforcement officials that wanted to see more change within the system, community members, and community members who strongly do not support the police. Through my interviews, I found that although dialogue is such an important factor within this issue today, there's hardly a space for it to even happen. And the dialogue that was happening was not effective because both law enforcement and the community could not come to a common ground. Community members for police reform stated suggestions law enforcement should implement, but law enforcement responded by implying how those suggestions would actually make the job more dangerous and put both the officer and the community at higher risk. This type of dialogue continues to happen. The community feels unsatisfied with their needs in police reform, and the police feel that the community is unable to understand the realities of police work. Another finding through these conversations with both sides, I found that law enforcement officials are open and willing to have conversations with the community to come forward to address these concerns. But some anti-police folks simply just do not want to show up for the conversation to happen. Lastly, through interviewing the community, they believe that most people hate police today, lack respect for them, and the police actually have worse interactions today than they did a year ago. However, by talking to law enforcement about this perception, they stated that they can see how it may seem that way, but it's not true. That they haven't had worse interactions with the community, but they've actually stayed the same, and that they still have high support from the community, but the community is just quiet about it because of the backlash that they may receive from people online. So through these findings, I found two key factors: lack of accurate perception and ineffective spaces for dialogue. Through these findings, I created my first iteration prototype that was a relational framework, and I called it the Circle of Hope. Engage was first, and through this category, I felt that it was super important to have a space for dialogue to happen in order for change to start. And after engagement, trust would start building slowly. Educate was next. Both sides needed to be educated on one another and understand what both needed in order for change to take place. Through educating one another, there's also an opportunity for trust to build. Lastly was embrace. Embracing meant looking at this issue as an opportunity to grow, embracing that we can see change if we strive to engage and be educated by one another, which leads to hope. So I tested this prototype with the anti-police community members and pro-police reform folks, and I was also able to sit down with a commanding officer from LAPD to get his feedback. Community members who did not support law enforcement were not fans of this framework. They did not want to engage or participate in educating one another. The feedback that I received from law enforcement was that they actually have something really similar to this framework, and it's called the Community of Police Academy. The Community Police Academy is basically an event that's held by LAPD each year for the community to come forward and learn about different units within the department, certain protocols that they abide by, and is also an opportunity to have some type of dialogue where the community can express concerns to law enforcement. This event has great turnouts, but there hasn't been one in over a year because of COVID. So after testing my prototype and receiving feedback, I was so discouraged because of how intense this issue is. I mean, I'm just a grad student taking on one of the biggest issues in our society today. I felt stuck and as if I didn't know what else to do with my project. I didn't know how to move forward. I was stuck. But after speaking to my design coach for encouragement, I felt ready to continue on and adjust. I was able to go on a ride along with LAPD to experience the interactions firsthand. And I was placed with a sergeant that cares about this issue just as much as I do. Through that experience and conversations that took place, I finally felt like I had a better grip on this project and had a deeper angle at it. Being on the streets of LA on a Friday night was something else. I got to experience calls of minor disputes and watched how they unraveled and how they were dealt with. I was also able to observe how the community interacted with police that were out on patrol. I saw so much brokenness within the community. From seeing a young man on the side of the street at 1 a.m., high off of a heavy drug and having an episode, to hearing explanations from a woman who had called the police to settle an argument that she was having with her schizophrenic dad, I began to truly see how broken our communities are today. So going home after that ride along, I thought deeper about this issue. This issue is so unique because it's driven off of interactions. The community and law enforcement both have one thing in common that makes it so difficult to find a solution. They're both human. We as humans mess up, we're closed-minded, we're stubborn, but we could also be considerate and willing. This is what makes this topic so interesting. In this context, they are human interactions where a protector is called upon to respond for help, or sometimes that protector is enforcing the law. Now, I want to engage you all in an activity, and I want you to think about a time where maybe you called your doctor's office and the receptionist that picked up, they answered the phone, maybe had an attitude, maybe they didn't let you finish your sentences, or maybe made you feel like they didn't care about what your concern was or why you were calling. This is an interaction, and this can connect to why the issue of the relationship between the community and law enforcement is so complex, because it's all about human interaction. The small interactions matter just as much as the big ones. The energy that police show up to smaller calls with is just as important as the big ones, because these interactions have the ability to shape a person's opinion and perception. So because it was nearly impossible for me to make big changes within a police department, as well as within the community, I had to change my prototype. The prototype that I created is a framework that can work within different contexts in life. But today, I'm going to be discussing it as it relates to the community and law enforcement. I call this relational framework the cycle of hope. This framework is intended to be a continuous cycle, and the reason why is because all aspects of this cycle are interconnected and have the ability to influence one another. This framework's goal is to bridge a gap between two parties, the community and law enforcement. So I'm going to define what each category means in this framework now. Engage. Engage is to have positive interactions with one another. This looks like waving, smiling, and having small talk conversations with one another. This step encourages humanization, to humanize each other regardless of what a person may be wearing or what they look like. We are people who have the ability to have small positive interactions with each other. The more small positive interactions, the better the relationships could be. Educate. Educate is to listen with empathy, to understand another person's perspective or experience. Through this step, law enforcement can use roll call meetings and as an opportunity to share their outcomes and experiences of having these small positive interactions with the community. The community can share their experiences about their small interactions with their close friends as well. So I kept in touch with the sergeant that I went on my ride along with, and I asked if he could maybe start implementing an opportunity like this to share within the roll call meetings. In police work, before every shift, there is a meeting that is known as roll call. In these meetings, the lead officer of that shift discusses anything that police have to look out for within the community that night, or maybe how to handle certain situations that are a little bit new. So I thought that this opportunity was perfect to have these types of topics come up and discuss within the roll call meeting. Doing this, it was a goal to engage officers. It was a goal to encourage officers to engage more with the smaller interactions with the community. Embrace. Embrace is to understand that this issue is a shared responsibility where we can only see change if we work with one another. One side cannot do all the heavy lifting. Each side has their own issues to grow from and with each other, and because they are interconnected. We can embrace this opportunity to grow from this issue by taking the steps to do so and having a conversation with one another. There's an opportunity to be better for each other, but it is a process that takes time. Hope. Through this framework, we can get that feeling of hope. Hope is aspiring for a better future, knowing that we can work together by wishing, aiming, and desiring for a better tomorrow. Hope is what keeps us going in life. It is important that we do not become discouraged about bettering the relationship because once we lose hope, we slow the process from change happening. Now, these are all small steps, but because this issue is so complex, the small steps are needed in the beginning of phases of change. I'm so grateful for this project because it is something that I'm truly passionate about. And now that I have been able to connect with an officer to implement more opportunities to share about the interactions within roll call meetings, hopefully it will reach other departments someday. There is a lot of work that is required to maintain a healthy relationship between both parties. We just have to be willing to work with one another. I hope that I can use this framework through the department that I find myself in someday and stress the importance of what is within this cycle. I have learned so much throughout the last 16 weeks. And a lot of the things that I've learned, or a lot of the things I've learned throughout this leadership program have came up in some way throughout this project. It's been tough to say the least. And I know Brittany touched on this, but for those of you who are aware of the Enneagram, I'm a type 9, which is a peacemaker, and I hate conflict, and I just try to keep the peace as much as possible. So this topic was perfect for me to take on for this project. I think that because I cared so much about this issue, and this issue is such a heavy topic, and I really wanted to try and come up with a solution to it, I think I just got so consumed in it, and it really made me have to take a step back and make sure that I was taking care of myself in order to make sure that I was approaching every phase in a healthy way. Because there was times where I recognized that my biases started peeking through, which affected my findings. But being able to recognize that and receive feedback was tough, was obviously really hard to do. But through it all, I have grown. Personally, I can say that my own framework has helped me and my mindset with this profession by working with the community and imagining what the relationship could look like someday. Here, we have an opportunity to grow from this issue. Let's work together, hear each other, and embrace this journey for a better tomorrow. Thank you.